listening to Living with ADHD and CPTSD, available on Apple and wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Living with ADHD and CPTSD. Today's episode, I have a very special guest on the show today. Her name is Tamara Rosier, and she is an ADHD coach, and she has also written a book called Your Brain is Not Broken. I actually am getting a free digital copy of this book, and I am planning to read it. And today's interview with Tamara is a really great interview, and I hope that you guys get a lot out of this. I think this is amazing. We are talking about ADHD and emotions. Basically, emotional regulation is a huge part of ADHD. It's just not widely talked about as much as things like focus and inattention and impulsiveness. So here we are, the interview with Tamara Rosier. So yeah, about the emotion side of ADHD, which is definitely not talked about nearly as much as the rest of it. So please go ahead and discuss the emotional aspect of ADHD.
Yeah, well, the DSM doesn't talk about emotional regulation at all. And yet, as you and I were talking about, it really permeates meaning emotional regulation and emotional impulses permeates every little bit of our ADHD lives. And, when I was writing the book, there was a part of me that was a little scared going, this whole book is about emotional regulation. And wow, doesn't seem like anyone else is writing on this. What if I'm completely wrong?
Yeah.
And the response in the book has been, oh my goodness, I'm finally feeling like I understand my brain. And so, I think you know this, and probably your listeners will know this too. The ADHD brain is made differently, right?
Yeah.
So we don't have access to the prefrontal cortex as readily for different reasons. So we rely on the limbic system as a way to gather information. And that limbic system is a place for fight or flight, or freeze. And so those of us with ADHD develop very, very twitchy amygdalas, trying to discern, is this dangerous? Is this not? What's going on here? Right?
Yeah.
Well, that stimulus turns into an emotion.
Right.
So we're like, oh, I have a big project due at work. How do I feel about this? This is very dangerous for me. And so I go into flight. Now I have feelings about this fight response I'm having, or I'm having feelings about the fleeing, right? And so it's this long emotional story that we concoct that's really the life of ADHD.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. I've my understanding of it, I got diagnosed back in April, and I've been aware of it for a couple years since, before that, and the understanding, knowing about it and learning exactly how it was affecting myself, and learning about the prefrontal cortex development and trying to tie all of it into my own experiences and my own trouble that I'm experiencing all the time. We were always trying to understand how the emotional side of it played into my struggle, because the one thing I've always had a problem with, and sometimes it's so frustrating, is that I have a really bad issue with working memory and forgetting something. Like you think about it and you know that you have to, it's like you have a task to do and you know you have to take care of it. You know, it's part of your, like the evening or your morning that you're doing chores or you're doing your work and it's in your mind. And then it feels like it takes nothing to suddenly just be gone. It's not there and you forget about it. And then you either remember it after the deadline, or you've completely gone off and done something different, and then you go, oh damn it, I forgot to take care of that one thing. And it's not just going, oh well, I'll take care of it when I get back. It boils up. It kind of like makes you just like, I'm not saying I'm throwing things around and losing my temper,
So let me piggyback on what you just said. So we have short-term and working memory issues. Short-term meaning we can't really, our grocery bag to hold things is very small. Working memory is that little whiteboard that we have to write things on in our brain is very small. Others have a bigger whiteboard. The problem is, and that's all prefrontal cortex, right? So if we take a stimulant, it can improve both of those. Yeah. But the problem is, because we have the short-term and working memory issues, a lot of times we'll use emotions to compensate. So a lot of my clients will have anxiety, which actually is an emotion. Mm-hmm. They'll have anxiety around, I've got to remember to do this today. I've got to remember to do this. And they're holding it in their memory by using emotion.
Yeah.
That's exhausting.
No kidding.
That's a freaking exhausting way to go through life. So,
see, that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's why those of us with ADHD, we're actually more tired, because that's an exhausting way to have to go through life.
Absolutely. You know, it's interesting you say that. Like, that's so true, because I know that there would be something extremely important that I know I have to do, or I must remember, because otherwise it throws everything off, or I won't be able to do like what I'm looking forward to doing. So instead of just being there, mm-hmm. and you remember it, no problem. Yeah, there's that constant like, oh, I gotta remember, I gotta make sure it's there. I can't forget. See, it kind of tricks someone, because it makes you think that you are remembering it, but it's like it's reinforcing it so much because mm-hmm. of the fact that you're afraid that you're going to forget it. Exactly. So it's like it's constantly reminding you and pushing it in you, and then it's working. It's like making you work so much harder and dealing with that emotion at the same time. Yeah,
here's another example of this. So most of us with ADHD also have some degree of time blindedness.
Yeah.
And mm-hmm. time blindness is a real thing. Okay. Yeah. On the part of our brain that would be this internal chronometer just simply isn't there. Okay. So if you ask someone who doesn't have ADHD, if you say, hey, what time is it? They'll be like, I think it's around 2. And they'll be sort of within at least within 20 minutes.
Right.
If you ask me, especially on a cloudy day, what time it is, I'm like, I have no clue. Right. So a lot of my clients, when they, I send out reminders to get my clients, to come into my office and all that. Some of them will show up early. And I always know the people who show up early, they're the most anxious people. Because they know that they're time blind. So what did they do to be on time? They
make multiple reminders, yeah.
No, they concocted all emotion. And the emotions turn into beliefs. I am a bad person if I show up late. I'm a bad person to show up late. So I'm going to be on time. and you hear this emotional force behind it. Damn it, I'm going to be on time. And they're in my office, and you can almost walk in and feel the vibration coming off of them because they are so intense of like, I made it here on time. And heaven forbid if I'm running 10 minutes late that day. Now they're kind of set off because they're like, I broke my neck getting here on time. Wow. Neurotypical people just simply don't act like that, by the way.
Yeah.
So just getting someplace on time takes emotional energy. So everything that we're doing takes a ton of emotional energy.
Wow. It's amazing. I'm having memories, like kind of like flashback memories of my own experiences relating to that. And that is so true. I'm actually kind of chuckling in my mind because I'm thinking to myself, yeah, I've had moments where I feel it's so important to make sure I'm on time that sometimes I arrive a little early, and I get a sense of pride or like, yeah, I made it on time because I know that I have been late before, or and absolutely, and that's, you're absolutely correct. I have that quite often because I know I have a tendency to run. I start running behind on things, whether it's because I'm doing another top or subject or something, and I'm working hard at it, and I'm thinking in the back of my mind, okay, I've got an appointment or I have to go somewhere for 3:00, and it takes nothing for you to kind of get caught up and even forget that, oh right, my appointment. So then you're running behind, and you it's constantly there, and there's that anxiety and that stress involved and making sure that you get there, and you feel so good inside because you've made it despite all the the things. And the other thing is, if I am running behind, all the things that are like traffic or that driver that's going slow, it's really it's enforcing it and making that anxiety like stronger because you're reacting to everything. You're like, oh my God, he's going so slow. Why are these lights always turning
and
red?
They're all emotional responses. That's exactly it. So can I tell you a story?
Sure.
This summer, my neurotypical daughter has been working for me as an admin, and let me tell you, she's fantastic. This young woman can out adult me at every turn. Okay. And I don't mean I'm childish. I mean, just in the executive function realm, she just is good on the spot. And I really appreciate her. She has her stuff together. She's in college. She's 20 years old. And for a few weeks, she was in between apartments. She was staying with us. So we drove together after work. We had these great talks. And one night after work, I said, hey, would you like me to swing through Culver's? I don't think you got a proper lunch. Would you at least like some kind of snack before you actually have dinner? She's like, yeah, that'd be really helpful. So we're going through Culver's, and we we're sitting in waiting for our food. And I hear a squeak in my car. And it's a squeak, but it's like something's grinding and sticking. And it's just when I'm moving my car, and I get scared. I'm like, oh no, I can't have my car break down. I need my car. I live 45 minutes from where I work. And oh my gosh, I've been meaning to call the automotive place forever. And we know these guys are good guys. I can trust them. And you hear all the emotion, right?
Right.
And so immediately I'm like, hey, I'm going to call the auto place a quick second. I've been meaning to call them. And my daughter doesn't say anything. She just looks at me. So I pick up, I'm talking to them. They're like, great. When would you like to bring it in? Well, I hadn't thought about that. I was just kind of caught up in the emotion of like, fix my car. And then the guy comes to the window, hands me the food. I'm like, thank you very much, sir. And I'm like, how about Tuesday at 9 to the person on the phone call? And so I get it. And I made the appointment, and I just feel fantastic.
Yeah.
And my daughter says, we kind of pulled into the parking lot so we can get the bag straightened out. She can get her food. And she goes, Mom, this isn't a criticism, but you handled that in a very ADHD way. She's like, neurotypical people would do it differently. And when I tell this story to my clients, they're like, wow, good job, Tamara. You remembered and you did it. But my neurotypical daughter's like, hey, notice it all started with a squeaky. You heard the brakes. It squeaked. It startled you. And you were afraid. And you acted on the emotion. And you wanted to fix it immediately. I said, well, yeah. I've had it on my list for weeks, but I keep never getting to it. So I wanted to get to it at that time. I waited for the emotion to tell me to do it. And it's funny because she's like, I said, so tell me, how would a neurotypical do that? And she's like, well, I'd just write it down and I'd schedule a time to do it and I'd do it during that time. I'm like, huh, it's that easy for you, huh?
Yeah. Wow.
Can you hear yourself in that story?
Yeah, I can. I have done that a number of times, I'm sure. You know, like something occurs and immediately my thought is, okay, I got to take care of this, or I've got to make sure that I do take care of it. And so, yeah, instead of just, okay, I'll take care of it when I'm back home or whatever. And then, of course, you do that. Like, I know, I feel like if I don't now, I'm going to, obviously, I won't, because it won't occur until the next time that sound or whatever comes up.
Well, and here's the key. It won't feel important. Yeah. It felt important while I was waiting for the food at Culver's. It didn't feel important when it was on my list, not hearing the sound. And to all your listeners, I really want them to understand, like, this is the key to understanding ADHD.
Right.
It's the feeling of that's what causes us to act.
Mm-hmm. Totally makes sense. It really does. Now, I have a question for you. A lot of people, one of the things that a lot of experts say is the lack of impulse control. Mm-hmm. Now, I guess that's where I still need to understand a few things and learn. Does the relation between impulse control and emotion, like, is it, to me, maybe I'm wrong, but maybe to me it sounds like they kind of fall on the same trail, because, you know, you do something impulsively and now my brain all of a sudden is thinking I'm doing something with emotion, like I'm emotionally reacting to it, and it makes me feel like it's like almost identical or very similar in aspect. Like,
sort of, it's the same coin but two different sides. So impulse control occurs in the prefrontal cortex, and that's like this very calm conductor going, you know, in my book I call it the butler. It's a butler just going, no ma'am, don't do that right now, this is what you should be doing. Okay. I watch a lot of BBC, so I have these imaginations.
Yeah.
Right? I have a great imagination about this. And so the prefrontal cortex is just going, ma'am, do this. Don't do this. Do this. And your keys are right there. There's no need to panic. You parked right here. There's all these things that the butler would do. When you have ADHD, you don't have a butler. Right. And that butler is in charge of impulse control.
I like that analogy.
Yeah, I write about this in my book. Instead, we have this angry neighbor, and he's shaking his shoe at us going, hey, listen, you son of a gun, if you throw trash on my lawn one more time, I'm coming to get you this time. And we have this like angry, like, don't you screw this up again. I'm tired of finding your keys on my lawn, kind of thing. Right?
Right. Yeah. Wow.
And so because we don't have this calm butler, we have this angry neighbor just shaking his shoe over the fence, yelling at us all the time. And that's the angry neighbor represents emotions, because usually it's the negative emotions that motivate us the best.
Right.
The happy emotions can motivate us, or they're not nearly as convincing as that angry neighbor.
Yeah, I see that. Like, yeah, you're absolutely right. Like, there's this whole thing about the dopamine effect, right? Like, you get that, you do something and it makes you feel good. So automatically you want to do that again, or you feel motivated to do that action again, or to do that task, because at the end result makes you feel good. But at the same time, it kind of, it interacts, but it also has like that issue with the emotional side, because if initially, and even if you have done it, there's always that like feeling of, oh, I don't want to make the effort today, or I don't feel like it. And then it's that sudden where you feel like, oh crap, I got to get it done now. If I don't, I'm going to get in trouble, or my boss is going to be angry at me, or, there's all these different examples that all of a sudden get you going, and then you're up and moving, and you're doing it. Yep. So I'm seeing it not being as simple as, oh, it feels good, so I like doing it, and I will always do it no matter what. But it's like, unless there's an emotional attachment as well, where it's pushing you, or you feel that fear or that anxiety that if I don't do this now, I'm going to hear it from my partner, or my boss is going to be on my back about it, so I do it now. Instead of like, because honestly, I don't know what it feels like to just do things.
Well, our just do it button is broken, right? You don't just do it. So in my book, I have a tool for us to kind of harness that approach. Yeah. It's called the Solve It Grid. And I can send a copy to you to have it on your website, if for your listeners. Because we're trying to like harness, like, let's just accept that's the way our brain works. If our just do it button is broken, let's just admit it. My just do it is broken. I wait for, like a method actor, I wait for what's my emotion for this scene? And that's how I know how to do things. So let's just accept it and plan on using it. That doesn't mean, though, that we constantly get ourselves angry to do things, because that's just going to wear us out. So that's why I came up with a Solve It Grid, to try to like help people understand how to manage that emotional energy. Okay.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm actually there are things that I like. I'm not exactly on the high end of like ADHD. I do have some level where I understand responsibilities and things. I know I have to do these things. I'm not emotionally charged,
you're a grown-up.
or like I'm not motivated emotionally with everything. There are some things that do, like, you don't want to, there's things you just don't want to do, like unless it's either has to get done or else, or but a lot of times, like, I go and do things, but I often do wonder if there is some attachment to anxiety or stress that is related to it, even if it's just like a real small streamlined amount that in the back of my mind is kind of going, I know I have to do this, but there's also that part of constantly going, okay, the next thing I need to do is take care of this step, or else this isn't going to look right. Or like, I think the best example I can come up with is yard work, right? Like, you got to get out. There's things you have to do. You have to cut the grass. You got to trim the weeds or the edging, and then you got to make sure that you blow the grass away so that it doesn't look like it's all over the place. And then there's cleanup. Like, there's always that constant, like, it's not just, I couldn't just go outside and go, all right, here's what to do, and then just do it without thinking. There's that constant reminder of, okay, have I done this? Is the front done? Is it like, does it look right? Have I remembered to clean up? Have I put everything away? So there's always that reminder, but it's not like I'm emotionally motivated to go outside and do the work.
I would still say there's still emotions there. And I've heard them while you were talking.
Yeah.
There's almost like a low level anxiety of, did I do it all? Can I be done now? Can I be done now? And that's still an emotional feeling. So I love yard work. I live for the weekends, spring, summer, and fall for yard work. And I love it. I feel like, I have permanent dirt under my nails. It's not really, that's kind of gross, but I just love the feeling, right?
Yeah.
And yet, you know what I hate? I hate making phone calls. And there's phone calls on my list. So I'm always amazed how much physical yard work I can get done.
Right.
And yet there's been phone calls that just keep kind of getting transferred from list to list to list. And the days flutter by on the calendar. And it's because I don't have the emotional interest to do those calls.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah.
And so there's something in the yard work that there's emotionally interesting to you.
Yeah.
And so if something I help my clients do is just really understand everything has an emotional charge, either positive or negative. It's like ions, right? Ions
Makes
for
sense.
us, right?
Yeah.
So other people don't have this. Now, you're still a grown up. You still get work done. You still put out 2 podcasts a week. This is great.
Yeah.
We can still look like grown-ups, push past that emotional charge. But if it's when the emotional charge builds up and it's too much, that's when we struggle.
Right. Yeah.
So I was just talking with a client. She has when you have ADHD, your senses tend to be turned up very high. And so she has this thing where she doesn't really like the sound of something that's happening at her job. But she's like, but it's not so bad that I'm shutting down. It's distasteful. And so she has to push past that negative. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me back up. Because our senses are turned up too high, we often have feelings about what we're sensing.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yep. And so she's learning to push through something she finds distasteful. It doesn't shut her down. Mm-hmm. But she's like, wow, I really am realizing how much I hate that sound at work. And so, we're talking about how can you dampen this sound? How can you do this and this and this? But it's interesting that she has an emotional response to something in her work environment that her peers would be like, I don't even hear it anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. I understand that. The only difference, I think, is that it affects me on positive.
Yes.
Because
absolutely.
I never noticed, I don't think I really was aware of it in my past until my girlfriend was the one who really mentioned it. As she was saying that neurotypicals, when something happy or exciting occurs, they experience it and they discuss it or bring it up, and it's for a few seconds. Whereas she was saying, with myself, it's it would last. I'd be excited, or I'd be talking about it, or I'd be all happy about it. But instead of it just being for a few seconds and moving on and going into the whatever I'm doing next, it's like I would hang on to that and push it to as far as I could get it, or get as much out of that expression or that emotion that I'm feeling as possible, until either she would say, okay, or it would finally wear off. And that's very interesting, because I think the negative side for myself, for example, doesn't seem to be as strong. It's all that the positive energy. Like, yeah, I like something happens, and I seem to, like, I guess the word is milk it as much as I can.
Yeah.
And stay with it, and either it wears off for me or someone says, okay, you know, it's, yeah.
Well, because, and why are you staying with that happy emotion? It feels dopamine.
Good.
Yeah, it feels exactly. Good. It feeds dopamine in your brain. You're like, why, yes, I want to talk about this. In fact, I want to talk for 50 minutes about this because it's so exciting and it feels so good for my brain.
Absolutely.
And that's, you know, without reducing us, we're still grown-ups, right? And we still do things.
Yeah.
But we tend to do things that feel good for us and want to hold on to that feeling.
Yeah. I know.
One of my daughters get back from vacation and go, I have nothing to look forward to anymore. And it's because the good feeling she was holding before we went on vacation is, I'm going on vacation. I'm going on vacation. Good feeling. Good feeling. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. Absolutely. You know, that's bringing back vacation memories now. Every time I went, I'd go somewhere, and, you know, it would be great. And it felt like it would be over just like that. Like, I got there and all of a sudden it's done. It's over. And I'm like, where'd the time go? And the other one is it'd be such a good experience, and the feelings and the emotions would be I'd be so attached to the experience that it would, like, the memories or that emotional attachment to it would just keep hanging on, and it would make me feel sad and like kind of depressed, because I'm like, all I could think about is, oh, I wish I was back there. It was so nice. And it would make me feel terrible.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
You hear how, like, I think the step to really managing our ADHD is all about understanding the emotional universe we live in.
Right. Mm-hmm. Totally.
And we have to respect it. Yeah. And we have to respect this about ourselves. It's who we are, and it's how we function.
Yeah. It's interesting. Like, as I said earlier before, I don't really know what it's like at all on a personal level, how a neurotypical person feels in so many situations. Like, I would give anything just to be able to have a day or two to feel, or to have that kind of brain where I could experience how they feel when a vacation ends, or when they're doing work and they get a positive response, and how they deal with it.
Yeah.
And, like, it's some part of me, like, I guess it's just because there's all the negative kind of feedback or you know, like, things that come from it that other people notice that they're bringing up or they're telling me, right? Yeah. Like, it's not just, like, if I could just be by myself 24/7 and do the things that I love, it would be all positives. And then we wouldn't be thinking, oh, this doesn't seem to be normal. Why am I doing, you know, there's always that negative aspect in your mind at the same time, going, why does this happen? Why do I always seem to feel too much? Or why does it seem to annoy someone, like other people? Like, why do they feel like I'm being too excited or too emotional? Like, it's
just a belief that that I have and many of my clients have. It's a false belief, but the belief is, I'm just too much.
Right.
Now that goes in a little bit with trauma too, but the belief is, I've been told I'm just too much. So I ask my clients to imagine a scale of 1 to 10, and those who are neurotypical, they behave emotionally throughout a day, usually at 4, 5, and 6.
Okay.
Now, 1 to 10 isn't happy, sad. It's 1 is no emotion, 10 is big emotion. Okay?
Yeah.
No emotion is what happens when we have too much big emotion and we just run out, the cup's empty. So neurotypicals usually run between 4, 5, 6. They're not too much. They're not too little. It just is.
Right.
You and I either are at a 1 or 2 or a 9 or 10.
Makes sense.
And unfortunately, where do we focus better? At the 9 or 10.
Yeah.
We don't focus at the 1 or 2. And so that's actually kind of the trick of our brain. It's like, unless we have the big feelings, we tend not to be interested. But then we have our neurotypical counterparts looking at us, like my daughter witnessing everything she did just for me to call the automotive place. I was at an 8 going, oh my goodness, I forgot to do this. And she's just looking and seeing all that big emotion going, wow, why don't you just put it on a list and do it? Now, she wasn't being unkind in that observation. She was noticing a difference.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I think that's the same in a different way, but it's the same thing for me. Like my girlfriend notices that if I'm motivated or I'm doing something or I've got like a thought in my head and I'm acting, doing the work or prepping to do it or whatever, like she notices how it's like, and she'll comment, it's like, you're just going, like you're like so intense and you're moving around and you're it's like it's like a bull in a china shop almost, right? Like it's not just moving at a normal neurotypical pace where you're doing this, you grab that, get like prepare to do your work. It's like I'm like, okay, gotta go now. So I'm rushing to do this. I'm grabbing that. You can totally see that there's this like okay, I'm on a roll. I gotta move. So everybody else is going, holy smokes, that guy's just going like crazy to get things done, and he's out there and he's doing the work. But she's like, it's like you're just so strong, you're so into it, you need to just calm and ground and to me I it's like I'm going, I don't understand it. Like, this feels typical, or this is like a normal thing. Like I'm like, I gotta do my work, boom boom boom, go go go, and I get the point about the neurotypicals where they just it wouldn't be like that. They would just, it would be all nice and flow and even, do that, get their work, exactly, grab what they need and do their thing. But that's the part that I guess I don't understand, is that I don't know, I can't tell, like I can't see as I'm moving that, hey, I'm going way too hard, or I'm extremely intense in the moment, and I can't, like, I have a difficult time stopping myself and taking a few seconds to like pace myself or calm down.
You just described lack of emotional regulation.
Yeah.
Everyone thinks emotional regulation is yelling. No, emotional regulation is, I'm not doing things in a whirlwind because I'm emotionally regulated myself. And that's what ADHD, those of us with ADHD, really have to work on. I mean, the whole argument of my book is we've got to work on emotional regulation first, because all those silly strategies that we try will never work unless we do the emotional regulation work.
Absolutely.
And unless I'm emotionally regulated, I can't. I'm starting to work on my next book. And the premise of this book is, the next book is, unless I'm emotionally regulated, I can't even be in relationships. Because I'm either too egocentric, wrapped up in my own stuff. I'm moving too quickly. I'm just trying to get things done. Like,
it affects the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
I know I have I have plenty of personal experience with that. That's very interesting. See, this is kind of interesting because I want to tie this in a bit, and I don't know your experience or knowledge with trauma relating like into this, but I've done some research online and I've talked to a few people where there's this theory that some people who were diagnosed with ADHD, whether it's in childhood or like early adult or at some point, they learn that they think that there's a possibility that it could either be a mixture of or maybe a misdiagnosis where it's actually trauma related. Yes. Because that, and I remember there was this one article and it was really descriptive and it actually helped me understand that they were saying that the development of the brain when the child is developing and he's experiencing all this trauma, like repetitive childhood trauma, that the development of the brain is very similar to ADHD development and so I was starting to think about and like examine and it's difficult because I can't narrow, I can't go, it's absolutely this or it's absolutely that. And it kind of has me a little like there's a bit of anxiety about it because my thoughts are if I could cure, I'm not saying cure, but if I could get the trauma under control, would a lot of the ADHD symptoms go away, or are they tied together? But you're not, you can't heal one and heal them both. I may be having a hard time describing this because it's just off the top of my head and all of a sudden now. But is it truly all ADHD? Is there a bit of trauma involved? Is it like adding to it? Is it mixing? Does it make it worse? Like there's all these little questions that are coming out.
Yeah, they're almost, you're asking a chicken egg kind of question, right?
Yeah.
So first of all, there's a neurological difference we call ADHD. And that's where those of us with ADHD can't really access the prefrontal cortex well or efficiently or consistently. Okay. So sometimes that means literally underdeveloped prefrontal cortices. So like it's literally, if we saw fMRI, it just doesn't light up. There's that kind of ADHD. There's a family history of it.
Right.
Okay. Remember, it's like if you are a parent with ADHD, your child has a 50% likelihood of having ADHD.
Yeah.
So that's the neurological, but then, and I hate to use these words, but then there's the kind of man-made ADHD.
Right.
Man-made comes from environment. And we know that low birth weight, trauma at birth, young trauma especially changes the brain, how it looks. And it's a very sad thing. And I wish our society got better at healing the brain. By the way, for those listeners who are thinking about this, I would look at functional medicine. Right now, they're doing a great job at talking about healing the brain. Most Western meds right now aren't thinking about healing the brain. They're trying to go after symptom management. That's just how they think and how work. Right. But functional medicine's doing some interesting things on healing the brain. That's not to say curing ADHD. But for those of us with trauma, it starts to heal the trauma induced. Now, trauma changed the brain already, but it starts to, because if trauma changed the brain, those neural pathways can sometimes heal because they were once there. This is, I don't usually go into all of this, but is this making sense? Yeah.
Absolutely.
So those of us who have ADHD, the kind of organic version, and experienced trauma, well, we're in a really bad place because we didn't have a prefrontal cortex to screen out a lot of the trauma that happened. And so, you know, my mother was borderline personality disorder. I have childhood trauma because of that. Right. And even though I'm in my 50s, I still carry that. I've done a lot of work to release it, to heal my own brain, but guess what? The ADHD is still there. And so I work every day to manage my ADHD. I don't heal my ADHD, I heal my trauma.
Right.
And you know, there's several ways one could go about healing trauma. But
absolutely.
So did that address kind of where you were going?
It did, because there's the thought, like, I guess I'm looking for clarification and understanding, and more like my knowledge and my expertise is just based on my own experiences and what I've been told. So I don't know personally that yes, it's this or that. I'm just basing it on what I've read and been told. But I guess I'm looking for more clarification on, like, is like kind of like if I was born with ADHD and I did deal with childhood trauma, like, it wasn't the most severe form of it, but it was still enough that I've got traumatic flashbacks and fears. It's just, does the trauma make the ADHD worse? Does the ADHD make the trauma worse? Like, does it go both ways? Yes. Like, and how much of it is like, okay, sorry, I got the one last thing is, like, if I experience an example of or an issue, a situation where my trauma is coming, I get triggered, and my ADHD is there, like, how much of that is being triggered and my childhood trauma coming up, and how much of it is the ADHD, like, acting and making, like, it's to me, it feels like it's very complicated. Like, it's not a matter of just taking one side and folding it over and the other one and then going, okay, it was 40% and 60%. Like, it feels so complicated, and that's, I think, a lot of where I'm confused, and it frustrates me, because I'm like, I have this, but was this my ADHD? Or was this my trauma? Was it both? Like, it's confusing and frustrating because I don't know the answer.
I would like to just kind of maybe say, I don't think it matters.
Okay.
I don't think we can splice out, did I do this and think this because of this or this? I think we have to accept it as one kind of thing that has now become a mixture. Right. Okay. It's like mayonnaise, like, we don't try to separate what's the oil in this. It's already been emulsified.
Right.
So trauma and ADHD emulsify. But the goal is, you do want to try to, and the trauma, try to go back and heal the trauma physically, and emotionally and cognitively. And so we need 3 approaches to trauma, because our body carries it, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure you've read The Body Keeps the Score.
Absolutely.
Brilliant. Yeah, brilliant work. The body keeps the score. So we have to heal it bodily. And I think that's where most of my clients need to actually start or finish up, because I don't think they're actually doing that work.
Okay.
And so for my clients with ADHD plus trauma, I strongly recommend finding a very good therapist who practices EMDR. Not just EMDR light. Yes. Yeah, not just EMDR light, like super duper EMDR. And
absolutely,
super duper is my qualification. Please don't call it, hey, do you practice super duper EMDR? But they're really, highly qualified in that, because
absolutely,
what happens is it gets attached in that limbic system that I said we have And the limbic system doesn't have words. And so EMDR kind of gently taps and goes, hey, can we kind of help you with a picture there? And then the words kind of leak out of that picture.
Makes sense. Yeah. I like that analogy. That's really good.
Yeah.
That works. Yeah. Like the therapist that I've been seeing for 3 years now, we are doing EMDR. It's just because of my chattiness and I seem to always have a new topic whenever I go visit him. The ability to do it hasn't always been there. Like I've done it about 4 times and it's an interesting experience. I completely agree with the EMDR because I have found it, despite not exactly doing it very much right now, I have found it to be helpful because I better understand myself and the correlation between the two. It sounds like it's almost like its own, in a way, it's like its own diagnosis. Like it's like an ADHD, PTSD mix. Like you can't necessarily separate. Like you can work on the trauma, but the two of them, they've developed. Like I've developed with them both, so it's not like I can just rip one away without affecting the other, and vice versa.
Right. So I would put it this way. Well, first of all, I would love to gently encourage you to set your mind to try to do EMDR consistently week after week, because it's wonderful. We have a brilliant therapist at our center who really is doing great work with this, and we're seeing great responses, specifically with trauma and EMDR. But here's what I recommend with my clients who have ADHD, and remember, I'm a coach, I'm not a therapist. Yeah. So, they see that our therapists are doing work. I work on more the daily self-regulation. Like, we develop beliefs around our self-regulation. Like if I just had a client text me, his wife is a hoarder. He just kind of blew up in a not nice way to her. I mean, he wasn't threatening. He wasn't a jerk, but he just kind of blew up in a not nice way. Well, he needs to have that emotional regulation because it spilled over now on his spouse.
Yeah.
That's not okay. So I work on what happens when it spills out. How do we fix it when it spills out? And how do we maybe kind of do a little bit more mindfulness on the, so that it doesn't spill out. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Back more to the ADHD here. You mentioned earlier, and we discussed it, about how we either are a 1 or a 10 when it comes to our emotion. Like,
yes.
And the neurotypicals tend to be between the 4 and the 6. And I can picture my own experiences a number of times now where something has occurred, like a negative experience has occurred, and it's like something I've done, and I notice that I'm sitting here, I'm standing and I'm listening to my partner talk to me, and I kind of, in my brain, I feel like I'm just numb, or like I'm like not really, like there's no emotion, there's no, like I'm able to think, but I'm having a difficult time comprehending, and I feel like I'm just standing there and I'm not really responding in an effective way or in an emotional response. Like I'm not being empathetic enough. I have a hard time like sounding sincere, like my sincerity is really poor. And so I'm thinking here, okay, I'm obviously sitting at like a 1 or 2 here. And if I'm trying to respond back, and if it's overwhelming or too stressful, all of a sudden I'm like at the 10 or the 9 or the 10 level, and I can't hit that 5 and do that correct response or the proper response without either sounding like I'm not caring and I just want to end the conversation, or I'm getting too angry. And yet I can't even recognize my own, like, I can't tell that I'm being over emotional or I'm being too strong. To me, it feels like I'm trying to be a 5 and it's actually being a 9 or a 10. It's extremely hard to tell.
It's interesting because there's a lot in that question.
Yeah, I know.
That's okay. So when you're listening, it really focuses on not focusing on yourself.
Yeah.
So in a way, for you to kind of like, this is what you're saying and like repeating it in your head, but also like, well, I have feelings about what she's saying to me. And to almost like put those feelings aside and go, no. I don't want an emotional reaction right now. I just want to listen to words. Yeah. Because what you did, in other words, we want to take it off that 1 to 10 scale completely.
Yeah.
And I can hear a listener going, that's impossible. You can learn to do it. You have to really slow yourself down. And it's exhausting. I mean, I'm a coach all day. I got to tell you, by the end of the day, I'm like, I don't want to listen to anything anymore because listening is hard for me.
Absolutely. I know that 100%. I can only do so much. I can only take so much info before I am getting antsy and I'm like, okay, I gotta go. I want, like, because I'm only going to be able to take in so much before it's just full and I can't.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I teach couples to teach each other, help me become a better listener. So I listen best. So this is something my husband and I worked out. He would tell me something and he would start on this story. And I'm thinking the entire time, I have no idea why I'm listening to this. Because I couldn't listen for a purpose. Now, I love him. I want to listen to him. But I didn't know if this was an amusing anecdote or he was telling me something that I had to do.
Right.
And so I said, we joked one time. I said, you know what would help me is if this is an amusing anecdote, just tell me it's an amusing anecdote. And that's fine. I won't be like sitting going, what am I supposed to do with this information?
Yeah, no kidding.
It helps.
I know. I actually have that experience, so I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, so it gives me a listen with a purpose. And so sometimes if he starts in on something, I'm like, hold up. Help me understand a second. What is my purpose for listening? And then I focus my energy on that purpose.
Yeah.
He's like, well, listen, I need you to understand about taxes right now. I'm like, okay, that's what I'm listening for.
Wow. That I could see that being extremely helpful because, totally. Okay, cool. All right, well, I guess that's it for this episode then. Thank you very much, Tamara, for coming on. This was extremely, very helpful and really informative. I absolutely loved the whole conversation.
Oh, I love talking with you. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. All right. Absolutely. This was great. I think I've learned, just for myself, I've learned a ton. And I hope my listeners have learned a lot about this as well, because this is extremely well. I can't remember the last time that this amount of information has been really helped explain so much and dive so much deeper into this. It's extremely helpful.
Oh, I'm delighted. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. You bet. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you guys later on. Okay. Bye for now.